Welcome to Reluctant Politico, where we connect the dots, follow the money, and occasionally ask, wait, he did what? This is a special deep dive compilation from our ongoing series Trump Corruption, a factual, unflinching, and sometimes absurd look at the scandals, grifts, and power plays of a man who turned the White House into his personal playground. We'll cover the hush money, the fake electors, the loyalty tests, the grifters, the lies, the lawsuits, and yes, the golden toilets. Whether you're doom scrolling or just trying to keep up, this series isn't about left or right, it's about right and wrong. And what happens when the rules no longer seem to apply. So buckle up. Because once you see it all in one place, you can't unsee it. Today we kick off a special series on corruption in Trump's government. Before we jump into today's scandals, let's take a moment to ask, why is exposing corruption so important? Well, history shows us that unchecked corruption can lead straight to dictatorship. Just look at Vladimir Putin as a prime example. Once upon a time, Russia had the chance to become a real democracy. In the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia tried capitalism, free speech, and even competitive elections. But then along came Vladimir Putin, a former KGB agent who played the system like a master. Putin came to power in 1999, and at first, he pretended to be a pro-democracy leader. But behind the scenes, he was silencing the press, jailing opponents, and handing out government contracts to his billionaire friends. Sound familiar? One of the first things Putin did was attack the free press. Any journalist who spoke out against corruption, jailed, exiled, or mysteriously assassinated. Now, let's fast forward to Trump. While he's not jailing journalists yet, he routinely attacks the media, calling them fake news and encouraging violence against reporters. See the trend? Next, let's talk about corrupt business deals. Putin made his billionaire friends even richer, giving them government contracts in exchange for loyalty. Now, look at Trump's inner circle, billionaires, lobbyists, and personal business deals made while in office. If you let a leader blend business with politics, you don't get a government, you get a mafia state. And finally, the most dangerous part, dismantling the legal system. Putin rewrote the Russian constitution so he could stay in power indefinitely. Now, in the US, we have laws preventing this, but Trump is already testing the limits. From refusing to accept election results to hinting he deserves more than 2 terms, these are the warning signs. Welcome to episode 2 of our deep dive into the corruption and chaos surrounding Trump's return to power. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the latest schemes reshaping American politics, because the grift never stops. And trust me, folks, it's like a reality show you can't turn off, except it's real and it's terrifying. First up, Trump's latest attempt at profiting off the presidency. Meet the Trump meme coin. That's right, the former, and somehow current, president has his very own cryptocurrency. Foreign governments and billionaires are free to invest, essentially sending money straight into Trump's pockets. It's an open invitation for corrupt individuals to funnel cash straight into President Trump's pockets, no questions asked. If this sounds like a legalized bribery system, that's because, well, it is. This is the same guy who promised to drain the swamp, and yet, here we are watching Trump profit off a cryptocurrency while actively leading the country. How is this not a massive conflict of interest? Simple, because Trump never lets laws get in the way of a good payday. But let's be real, Trump has always treated the Constitution like a bad Yelp review, something to ignore, but wait, there's more. As if the Trump meme coin wasn't shady enough, he also decided to make bribery easier than ever. Because what's corruption without a little policy change to back it up? Yep, you heard that right. Trump paused the enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, a law that prevents US businesses from bribing foreign officials. Why? Because corruption is easier when there are no rules. Legal scholars are calling this move dangerous and unprecedented. But Trump world just calls it Tuesday. Folks, this is just episode 2 of our deep dive into Trump's corruption. In episode 3, we explore how the NLRB's dismantling benefits billionaire buddies. Welcome to episode 3 of our corruption series. Today, we are diving into a critical issue affecting every American worker, President Trump's assault on labor rights. His latest move: firing key members of the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, the agency responsible for protecting workers from corporate exploitation. And guess who stands to benefit? Billionaire tech moguls like Elon Musk. First, let's talk about Tesla and SpaceX, both owned by Elon Musk. Neither company is unionized. In fact, Musk has been openly hostile toward unions, once describing them as a lords and peasants scenario. Tesla factory workers filed unfair labor practice charges with the NLRB, alleging that the company engaged in illegal surveillance, coercion, and intimidation to hinder unionization efforts at the Fremont factory. SpaceX employees wrote an open letter critical of Elon Musk, leading to the termination of several employees. The NLRB accused SpaceX of illegally firing these employees in retaliation for their criticism. In response, SpaceX filed a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the NLRB structure. Now, what about other tech giants like Google and Meta? While these companies aren't unionized either, their employees have increasingly organized to protest workplace issues. For instance, in 2018, Google employees staged walkouts protesting the company's handling of sexual harassment allegations. In response, Google faced accusations of retaliation and was investigated by the NLRB for alleged union-busting tactics. Similarly, Apple employees initiated the #Apple2 movement in 2021, highlighting workplace grievances and facing challenges in their organizing efforts. So how does President Trump's firing of NLRB members play into this? By removing key figures like Gwyn Wilcox, the NLRB is left without a quorum, effectively stalling investigations into companies like Tesla and SpaceX. This move not only benefits Musk but also sends a clear message to other tech giants: the watchdogs are gone, you're free to operate as you please. With a weakened NLRB, their challenges are set to increase, potentially leading to more workplace exploitation and silenced voices. In case you were not aware, the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, does investigate certain claims even if a company is not unionized. Here's how it works. The NLRB enforces the National Labor Relations Act, NLRA, which protects both union and non-union workers from unfair labor practices. That means, if workers at a non-union company try to form a union or speak up about workplace conditions, the company cannot legally fire, punish, or intimidate them. Labor rights are essential human rights. When the systems meant to protect these rights break down, workers suffer while corporate greed takes over. It's crucial to stay informed and hold those in power accountable. In episode 3 of the Trump corruption series, we are diving into one of the biggest power grabs in modern history: Trump's mass firing of inspectors general. These are the watchdogs of democracy, and when you fire the watchdogs, you're hiding something. Trump abruptly fired at least 17 inspectors general, officials responsible for overseeing government agencies and exposing corruption. These weren't random firings, they targeted those investigating Trump's own administration. And here's the kicker: under the Inspector General Act of 1978, these watchdogs are supposed to be independent. The law says they can't be removed without a valid reason. So, did Trump just break the law? Complicating matters further is the involvement of Elon Musk. Appointed by President Trump to lead the newly established Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, Musk's dual role as a government official and head of companies with substantial federal contracts presents potential conflicts of interest. Reports indicate that several of Musk's companies, including SpaceX and Tesla, have been subjects of federal investigations or regulatory scrutiny. The removal of key oversight officials raises questions about the impartiality and effectiveness of these investigations moving forward. The mass firings raised serious legal and ethical questions. Why? Because these inspectors general were looking into major scandals, from misuse of taxpayer money to political interference in investigations. By removing them, Trump has crippled government accountability. When a leader removes the very people tasked with investigating them, that's not reform, it's corruption. In episode 5 of Trump's corruption series, we are diving into one of the biggest conflicts of interest in modern government: Elon Musk's appointment as the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. What happens when a billionaire with federal contracts, pending lawsuits, and labor violations gets placed in charge of cutting government oversight? The DOGE was created under Trump's administration with one goal: to eliminate wasteful government spending. Sounds good, right? Until you realize that a waste means regulations, investigations, and safety mandates that hold corporations accountable. Any better to run it than a man who has been under federal investigation for years. Here's where things get interesting. Musk's companies, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, and The Boring Company rely heavily on federal subsidies and contracts. SpaceX alone has received billions in government funding. But wait, he's also been investigated for union busting, workplace safety violations, and misuse of government funds. What happens when the man under investigation becomes the man in charge of the investigators? Now, as the head of Doge, Musk has the power to shut down investigations into himself. Government oversight gone. Worker protections weakened. Safety mandates eliminated. This isn't draining the swamp, it's turning it into a billionaire's playground. So why Musk? Simple. Trump rewards loyalty. Musk has been a vocal supporter of Trump, and in return, he's been handed the keys to dismantling regulatory agencies that were investigating him. This is the textbook definition of a conflict of interest, but under Trump's administration, it's just another Tuesday. The billionaire takeover of government isn't coming, it's already here. Musk now has unchecked power to shape regulations in ways that benefit himself and his companies, all while escaping accountability. What could possibly go wrong? Up next, Episode 6, Weaponizing Justice, DOJ's Operation Worldwide. Because when the Department of Justice stops investigating corruption and starts targeting political opponents, you know democracy is in danger. Welcome back to Reluctant Politico. Today, we're looking at one of the most dangerous abuses of power yet, the Department of Justice's Operation Worldwide. What happens when the DOJ stops going after criminals and instead starts going after political opponents? According to Trump's DOJ, Operation Worldwide is a crackdown on deep state actors and domestic threats to America. But let's be real, this isn't about justice, it's about revenge. Reports indicate that the DOJ is targeting political opponents, former government officials, and even journalists critical of the administration. Who's on the list? Let's see: former DOJ officials who investigated Trump in the past. State election officials who certified the 2020 election results. Journalists who exposed corruption scandals. Activists who protested Trump's policies. Top Biden administration officials who oversaw national security. Medical experts like Dr. Fauci, now stripped of government security protections. Attorneys who worked on Trump's legal cases, terminated and replaced with loyalists. This isn't law enforcement, it's a political purge. We've seen this before. In authoritarian regimes, weaponizing the justice system is step one. When leaders use legal power to crush opposition, democracy dies. And make no mistake, this isn't about stopping corruption, it's about stopping anyone who stands in Trump's way. And it's not just about arrests. Trump has stripped security clearances from former officials who oversaw national security, including members of the Biden administration. Even Dr. Fauci has lost federal security protections, a move widely seen as political retribution. Meanwhile, attorneys involved in past legal actions against Trump have been purged from government roles. This is a full-scale takeover of the justice system. Let's be clear, this isn't just corruption, this is dismantling democracy from within. When justice becomes a tool for punishing enemies and rewarding loyalists, America isn't a democracy anymore, it's a dictatorship in the making. When the justice system becomes a political weapon, no one is safe. Today it's journalists and election officials, tomorrow it's anyone who speaks out. The question is, how far will this go before America pushes back? Up next, Episode 7, Silencing the Workforce, Trump's Assault on Labor Protections. Welcome back to Reluctant Politico. Today, we're exposing Trump's all-out war on workers, how his administration is gutting labor protections, silencing employees, and giving corporations even more power over the workforce. If you thought union busting was bad before, just wait until you see what's coming next. Let's talk about what's happening right now. Mass rollbacks of worker protections, from overtime pay to safety regulations. Cracking down on unions, blocking organizing efforts, restricting collective bargaining rights. Making it easier for companies to fire workers without cause, stripping away employee protections. One of the biggest attacks on workers. Trump's executive order eliminating federal protections for government workers. This means that thousands of public employees can now be fired for political reasons, turning government jobs into a loyalty test. Sound familiar? That's Dictatorship 101. But it's not just government workers. Trump is making life even easier for corporate giants. Companies like Amazon and Tesla have a history of union busting, unsafe working conditions, and retaliating against employees. With Trump's rollback of labor laws, it's open season on workers. Here's what's happening. Heavy checkmark. Wages are stagnant while executive bonuses skyrocket. Fewer workplace safety inspections mean more dangerous jobs. Gig workers lose protections, allowing companies to exploit temporary and contract employees. The right to unionize is under attack, making it nearly impossible for workers to negotiate better conditions. And if you think fighting back is an option, think again. Trump is encouraging crackdowns on worker protests, making it easier to punish employees for speaking out. In some states, anti-protest laws mean that workers risk arrest, fines, or termination just for demanding fair treatment. This isn't just bad policy, it's an attack on the very foundation of workers' rights. From the labor movements of the early 1900s to the civil rights era strikes, American workers have fought, and sometimes died, for the right to a fair wage, safe working conditions, and job security. Trump is rolling all of that back. If history has taught us anything, it's that workers don't stay silent forever. But how much damage will be done before that happens? With fewer rights, less job security, and a government working for corporations instead of people, America's workers are facing the biggest fight in decades. Up next, Episode 8, The Judiciary Under Siege, Challenging Judicial Independence. Because when Trump is done destroying worker rights, he's coming for the courts next. Welcome back to the Trump Corruption series. Today, we are diving into one of the most critical issues facing our democracy, the assault on judicial independence. From attempts to stack the courts with loyalists to public attacks on judges who rule against the administration, we know how these actions threaten the foundation of our legal system. President Trump has publicly criticized federal judges who have ruled against his policies, labeling them as activists and questioning their legitimacy. There have been attempts to appoint judges based on loyalty rather than qualifications, undermining the impartiality of the courts. The administration has shown willingness to retaliate against judges who do not align with its agenda, posing a direct threat to judicial independence. Despite these pressures, some judges have courageously upheld the rule of law. Notably, Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett, appointed by President Trump, has demonstrated judicial independence in her rulings. Justice Barrett joined a majority in the Supreme Court to reject President Trump's attempt to freeze nearly $2 billion in foreign aid, upholding a lower court's decision to release the funds as approved by Congress. This ruling emphasized the judiciary's role in checking executive overreach. Another significant development is the judiciary's response to the administration's mass firings of federal workers. Federal judges have ruled these actions unlawful, ordering the reinstatement of thousands of employees. These moments really spark hope for Americans, you know. When they stand up for democracy and each other, it feels like the chaos can finally come to an end. The strength of our democracy relies on a fair and impartial legal system. Stay informed and engaged, because the integrity of our institutions depends on it. Up next, Episode 9, The Death of Scandal, Normalizing Corruption. Because when corruption becomes the norm, accountability fades away.
Welcome back to the Trump Corruption series. Today we're talking about something even more dangerous than a single scandal, when corruption becomes normal. From Trump's deals with Saudi Arabia and the PGA to selling MAGA hats inside the White House, we'll explain how scandals that once shocked the nation are now just another Tuesday in the Trump era. Let's start with Trump's cozy relationship with Saudi Arabia. Remember the uproar when the Saudis were linked to the 9/11 attacks and the U.S. condemned their human rights violations? Well, none of that stopped Trump from cutting deals with them, especially when it came to his beloved golf courses. Saudi-backed LIV Golf has been hosting events at Trump's properties, injecting millions into his business. Trump publicly defended the Saudi government, even after the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Government ethics experts warned of conflicts of interest, but by then, Americans had been conditioned to accept corruption as business as usual. Now, let's talk about something even more absurd. The White House Oval Office doubling as a Trump merchandise store. From MAGA hats to Trump-branded cologne, the People's House became a glorified shopping mall for the president. MAGA hats were sold inside the White House. Trump's businesses continued making money off the presidency. Ethics laws? Ignored. Think back to past political scandals. Watergate ended a presidency. Iran-Contra was a national disgrace. Even a personal scandal like Clinton's impeachment shook the country. But in the Trump era, scandals don't stick because they never stop. When corruption is constant, the outrage fades. Profiting from the presidency is no longer shocking. Foreign influence in government decisions? Just another news cycle. Breaking ethical norms. Trump did it so much that people stopped keeping track. And here's the real danger. When corruption is normalized, accountability disappears. We stop expecting ethical leadership, and corruption becomes just part of the job. Trump has rewritten the rules of corruption. Future presidents now have a blueprint for profiting off their office. The more scandals pile up, the harder it is to make any single one matter. This is how democracy erodes, not through one big scandal, but by 1,000 small ones that no one stops. The question is, how much corruption can America tolerate before there's nothing left to protect? Up next, Episode 10, Sycophancy and Toadying in Trump's Administration. Because when a leader surrounds himself with people who only say yes, power goes unchecked. Welcome back to the Trump Corruption series. Today, we're diving into a critical issue that has defined the Trump administration, the culture of sycophancy and blind loyalty. We'll explore how this environment has led to policy failures, ethical breaches, and a government that serves one man's interests over the nation's. Before we go further, let's define what we mean by sycophancy and toadying, because honestly, we've had a masterclass in both lately. Sycophancy is excessive flattery or praise given to someone powerful, usually to gain favor or keep your job. Example: Mr. President, you're the greatest negotiator in human history. Toadying is being a yes man, a bootlicker, someone who agrees with everything the boss says, even when it makes zero sense. Example: Yes, sir, disinfectant injections do sound like a great idea. And now that we've got that cleared up, let's go meet the cast of Trump's loyalty Olympics. From the onset of his presidency, Trump has prioritized personal loyalty over competence, creating a government where flattery is the currency and dissent is a liability. Some examples: Elon Musk's elevated role. Despite national security concerns, Musk is deeply embedded in policy discussions and advisory roles. Dan Bongino's appointment. A former Secret Service agent and MAGA loyalist now holds a top position at the FBI. Carrie Lake at VOA, a partisan news voice appointed to lead Voice of America, a traditionally independent news agency. Rick Grenell's loyalty tour. Named acting director of national intelligence with no intelligence background, but full Trump allegiance. J.D. Vance's flip-flop. Once a Trump critic, now among his loudest defenders in exchange for political elevation. The culture of sycophancy extends beyond appointments. Republican lawmakers have proposed measures to honor Trump, including adding Trump to Mount Rushmore, amending the Constitution for a third term. This isn't just loyalty, it's cultish devotion, and it's reshaping the executive branch into a personal empire. Government isn't supposed to be a cult of personality. It's supposed to be a system of checks and balances. But under Trump, loyalty replaced truth, and flattery replaced service. That's not leadership. That's authoritarianism. Up next, Episode 11, Pay to Play, Grift, Influence, and the Price of Proximity. Because all this loyalty, it came with a price tag, paid for by you. Welcome back to Episode 11 of Trump's Corruption series. First, we're talking about what might be the most straight-up transactional episode of the Trump era, how access to the president became a luxury item. From $100,000 a plate dinners to former officials weaponizing their legal connections to protect Trump, this is pay to play, where corruption isn't hidden, it's on the menu. Want to bend the president's ear? Just write a big enough check. Since returning to office, Trump has revived and doubled down on the Mar-a-Lago pay-for-access model. Guests shell out tens, or hundreds, of thousands for a seat at the table, a selfie, and a whispered policy ask. Some events openly target foreign business interests, oil lobbyists and defense contractors, blurring the line between diplomacy and donation. Number 2. Remember Pam Bondi, former Florida AG, now a key figure in Trump's post-indictment legal survival squad. She once refused to prosecute Trump University after receiving a $25,000 donation. And now, she's helping dismantle federal criminal enforcement protections that might have kept Trump in check. This is what happens when your defense team and your political machine are the same people. Number 3. Ambassadorships for sale. And if cash and loyalty weren't enough to get you into Trump's inner circle, how about a diplomatic post? Multiple reports show that under Trump, donors received plum ambassadorships, not for foreign policy experience, but for writing large checks to his campaign or inauguration fund. One top donor was appointed ambassador to Austria after giving over $1 million. Another got the U.S. Virgin Islands. It's political tourism at taxpayer expense. These are more than favors. They're shields. Legal shields, political shields, media shields. When the people around the president are donors, defense attorneys, and PR fixers, corruption doesn't just happen. It gets protected. No oversight, no accountability, just influence, for a price. If you can't afford the dinner table at Mar-a-Lago, you're not part of the conversation. That's not democracy. That's a corrupt paywall around power, and it's getting worse. Trump's presidency has turned political power into a luxury product, available to the highest bidder. Up next, Episode 12, The Cost of Corruption, Waste, Abuse, and You Paying the Bill. Because of all this grift, someone's got to pay for it. And spoiler alert, it's you. Welcome back to the last episode of Trump's corruption series. For our final episode, for now, we're following the money, not just how it's made, but how it's wasted. Because when Trump's inner circle treats the federal government like an unlimited expense account, guess who gets stuck with the bill? That's right, you. Let's start with some of the greatest hits of government waste. $43,000 soundproof phone booth in EPA Chief Scott Pruitt's office. Private charter flights taken by multiple Trump officials, including trips on military jets for personal reasons. Luxury hotel stays in Europe, first-class flights, and security upgrades for trips to Trump properties. And most of it paid for with taxpayer money. Then there's the infamous Trump International Hotel in D.C., which functions like a hub of influence peddling. Foreign governments, lobbyists, and Republican officials all book rooms there, knowing exactly who would notice. And while Trump said he donated his salary, he earns millions in profit through his hotels during his presidency. Your tax dollars? They funded his guests. How did they get away with it? Easy. Ethics waivers. Trump's White House issued more conflict of interest waivers than any modern administration, letting former lobbyists regulate the industries they just worked for. A conflict of interest waiver is essentially a permission slip from the government that says, yes, this person has a conflict of interest, but we're going to let them do the job anyway. Accountability wasn't just absent, it was intentionally dismantled. This isn't just about waste, it's about trust. While officials are spending lavishly, they are also threatening Social Security for millions, destroying the federal government, wrecking our Department of Education. So when they say, we can't afford healthcare or housing, they could afford $1,500 office chairs and $25,000 in flights. Just not for you. Corruption isn't always backroom deals or secret tapes. Sometimes it's in plain sight, on an invoice stamped, paid by the American people. Trump's administration showed us what happens when the government works for the rich, the connected, and the loyalists, while the rest of us foot the bill. This was Episode 12, The Cost of Corruption. And while this season ends here, trust us, the grift never sleeps. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Because this isn't just a series. It's a warning. If you've made it this far, first of all, thank you. What you just watched is a full timeline of corruption, chaos, and consequence. A series of stories that aren't just about Trump, but about the erosion of norms, the abuse of power, and what happens when accountability goes out the window. From the January 6th comparisons to imported eggs, foreign business dealings, attacks on the justice system, and political grifts disguised as policy, this isn't just political drama. This is history happening in real time. And if no one calls it out, it keeps getting worse. That's why this channel exists, not because I love politics, but because I'm a reluctant politico, just like you. I'm here to shine a light, ask the hard questions, and break it all down with facts, clarity, and just enough sarcasm to stay sane. So if this hit home, if you're frustrated, curious, or just tired of feeling like you're watching the country slide off a cliff in silence, hit that subscribe button. Join this growing community of people who are wide awake and paying attention. We've got more deep dives, breakdowns, and truth-telling on the way. And trust me, we're just getting started. Thanks for watching. Stay smart, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next one.